Your partner looked at you and said, "I think I'm fine." Just 2 words. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong, but there was something in the way they said it, something in their tone that stopped you, a slight drop toward the end, a half-second pause before choosing the words. Maybe their voice was a little too flat. Maybe it carried a faint edge that no one else in the room would have noticed. But you noticed. You're the kind of person who doesn't just listen to what's being said. You listen to how it's being said. And now it's stuck in a corner of your mind, quietly scratching at you. You're replaying it while you sort through the laundry. You're turning it over on your commute to work. By the time you climb into bed tonight, you'll have analyzed that "I'm fine" from 6 different angles and still won't be sure what it actually meant. Not because you're making things up, but because there's a part of you that has always listened for what people really mean beneath what they actually say. And that part has never gone quiet. If this feels familiar, there's a reason. You're not imagining things, and you're definitely not alone. There's a whole psychology behind why certain women become so deeply tuned into shifts in tone, subtle pauses, and the emotional texture of ordinary sentences. And it has very little to do with being too sensitive. It actually has everything to do with how your mind learned to read the world around you. Here's something most people don't stop to think about. Words are only a small, surface-level fraction of what actually gets communicated between 2 people. Researchers who study human behavior have known for decades that tone, rhythm, and delivery often carry more emotional information than the sentence itself. When someone says, "It's fine," in a warm tone, your whole body relaxes. You feel it and you know it's true. When they say the exact same words in a clipped, distant tone, something inside you shifts. You don't choose to notice that difference. Your brain does it automatically, faster than conscious thought can even register what happened. For a lot of women, especially those with high emotional intelligence, this isn't just a casual observation. It becomes a constant background process running beneath every interaction. You don't just hear what your partner says, you deeply analyze how they say it. The speed, the pitch, the tiny gaps between words. You read their voice the way someone else might read a facial expression. And here's the interesting part. You're right more often than people give you credit for. You do catch real shifts. Your perception is sharper than most people realize. The difficulty isn't in what you notice. The difficulty is in what happens after you notice it. Because the moment you sense that something's off, your mind doesn't just register it and move on. It opens a file. It starts collecting evidence. It connects tonight's tone to last Thursday's silence, and that slightly distant text from 2 days ago. Before you even realize it, you're building an entire story out of fragments, and you can no longer tell which parts are real and which parts you're overthinking filled in. The line between observation and interpretation disappears, and suddenly you're carrying the weight of a conversation that may have never actually taken place. And somewhere in the process, you start wondering if maybe you're just building it all up in your head. What psychologists often describe as the tendency to overanalyze isn't some random label. It usually follows a very recognizable pattern. First, there's a small signal, something your partner said or the way they said it. Then there's a gap, a moment where you don't have enough information to know what it means. And then your mind rushes in to fill that gap with meaning, usually the kind of meaning that confirms your deepest fear. He barely talked to me, so he must be pulling away. That old warmth wasn't in his eyes, so something must be wrong between us. She paused before saying, "I love you," so maybe she didn't fully mean it this time. Or maybe it wasn't a heartfelt, "I love you," at all. The habit of filling silence with worst-case scenarios isn't a flaw in how you're wired. It's actually a form of self-awareness working overtime. Your mind is trying to protect you by anticipating problems before they surface. Think of it like an internal weather radar that's constantly scanning the emotional atmosphere around you, searching for the smallest shift in pressure, trying to keep you one step ahead. The intention behind it is deeply caring and protective. It comes from a place that genuinely wants to keep your relationship safe and close. But when that radar never gets a chance to power down, it starts detecting storms that aren't actually forming, and you end up bracing for impact in a room where nothing is falling apart. You tense up over a pause that meant nothing. You prepare yourself for a difficult conversation your partner never planned to have. So where does this behavioral pattern actually come from? For a lot of women, it traces back to early experiences. Reading the room wasn't just a social skill, it was a necessity. Maybe you grew up in a home where the emotional atmosphere could shift without any warning, where one parent's mood set the temperature for the entire house, and you learned very young that paying attention to someone's tone of voice was a way of staying prepared for whatever might come next. Or maybe you went through a relationship where you missed the signs, where everything fell apart in a way that blindsided you, and somewhere deep inside, you made a quiet promise to yourself that you'd never be caught off guard like that again. Either way, your brain made a decision a long time ago. If I can hear the shift early enough, I can fix it before it gets bigger. And in a lot of situations, that instinct served you well. It made you perceptive, emotionally sharp, and deeply attuned to the people you care about. But in a safe, stable relationship, that same instinct can start working against you. Because when your mind is wired for detection, even a completely neutral tone can register as a warning. Silence stops feeling comfortable and starts feeling like something left unsaid. And a simple "I'm fine" turns into a puzzle you feel compelled to solve. This is where things get complicated in your everyday life. When you're constantly reading your partner's tone, you're not just passively processing information. You're carrying an invisible emotional workload that they probably don't even know exists. You're spending real energy interpreting, cross-referencing past conversations, and managing your own reactions to things they haven't even said, all before an actual conversation ever takes place. And most of the time, you never bring it up. You just hold it. You sit with it quietly, running the entire analysis alone inside your own head, wondering whether you're right or whether you're just doing that thing again. That kind of inner work is exhausting, and over time, it changes how you show up in the relationship in ways that are hard to see from the outside. You might start asking carefully worded questions designed to test what you think you heard. Are you sure everything's okay? Ask 3 different ways in one evening, or you might pull back entirely, getting quieter yourself because you don't want to overreact to something you're not even sure is real. Your partner notices you've withdrawn, but can't figure out why, because from their perspective, they just said, "I'm fine," and meant exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the invisible gap that so many couples live inside without ever naming it. One person speaks in plain text, the other reads between every single line, searching for reasons, consequences, and assumptions underneath. And the truth is, neither one is wrong. They're just operating on completely different frequencies. What psychologists call bids for connection, those small, everyday moments where one partner reaches out emotionally, can get completely lost inside this gap. A simple comment, a passing joke, even a quiet sigh can be received as something loaded when your mind is already deep in analysis mode. The very sensitivity that makes you so attentive can also cause you to misread the moments that were meant to be easy. And then night comes. The house is quiet, the day is done, and suddenly your brain has all the space it needs to replay everything it's been holding. That's when the racing thoughts really pick up speed. That moment at dinner, the look he gave you when you told the story about work, the way she said good night just a little faster than usual. During the day, you were busy enough to push it aside. But now, lying in the dark with nothing left to distract you, there's nothing to compete with the noise inside your head. All your focus turns to what was said and how it was said. A lot of women describe this experience in exactly the same way. The day belongs to responsibilities, to other people's needs, to keeping everything running smoothly. But the night belongs to your mind, and your mind uses that quiet time to process every unresolved emotional thread from the past 16 hours. It treats every unanswered question like an open tab that needs to be closed before you can rest. It's not that you want to be awake at 2 a.m. picking apart a 3-second exchange. It's that your brain genuinely believes this work matters, that if you just think hard enough, you'll finally reach a conclusion that brings you peace. But that peace almost never comes, because you're trying to solve an emotional equation with logic alone, and feelings don't resolve that way. They don't need solutions. They need space. They don't need calculation. They need conversation. Here's what I hope you take away from everything I've just described. If you see yourself in all of this, it's not a description of something broken in you. It's a description of a mind that pays deep, careful attention to the people it loves. A sensitive mind is also a vivid mind, a deeply feeling mind, a mind that does quiet emotional labor the world rarely sees or appreciates. What gets dismissed as too much is often just depth that hasn't found the right space to be valued. This isn't a weakness. This isn't a flaw. What psychologists call this kind of inner processing is simply a reflection of how deeply you connect with your relationships and with life itself. The tendency to analyze tone isn't something that needs to be eliminated, but it is something worth understanding. Because when you can see the pattern clearly, when you can name what your mind is doing in the moment it's doing it, you give yourself a choice you didn't have before. You can notice the signal without automatically building a story around it. You can feel the shift in someone's voice and simply sit with it instead of rushing to decode what it means. You can ask yourself one quiet question. Am I responding to what's actually happening right now? Or am I responding to what I'm afraid might be happening? That single question changes the whole equation. You can't silence the overthinking completely, and that's okay. But this question creates a small space between the moment you hear something and the moment you react. And in that space, something powerful happens. You get to decide what comes next instead of letting the old pattern decide for you. This isn't about controlling your mind. It's about building a new mindset, a new relationship with your own inner world. The strongest relationships aren't built in the big dramatic moments. They're built in the ordinary minutes, the Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings when nothing remarkable is happening, but both people feel genuinely seen. Research on relationships shows us this over and over. The couples who thrive aren't the ones who never misread each other. They're the ones who learn to check in rather than check out, who eventually found the courage to say, "Hey, I noticed something in your voice earlier and it stayed with me. Can we talk about it?" Instead of spending 3 silent days building theories alone. That kind of honesty doesn't come naturally to most of us, but it gets easier the more you practice it. It makes the whole flow of everything easier. It's something you learn by trying. You don't have to silence your mind completely. That was never the real goal. The goal is to let your awareness inform you without taking over completely, to use that incredible sensitivity you carry as a bridge toward deeper connection, rather than a wall that keeps you trapped inside your own interpretation. Because the same depth that keeps you awake at night is the very same depth that makes you the kind of partner who notices when something is genuinely off, who remembers the things no one else would remember, and who loves with an intensity most people will never come close to understanding. This isn't overthinking gone wrong. This is your emotional intelligence doing exactly what it was built to do. The only shift worth making is learning to trust that sometimes "I'm fine" really does just mean I'm fine. And that even when it doesn't, you don't have to figure it all out on your own. And you certainly don't have to figure it all out tonight.